It's not every day that I find someone who holds the same rebellious philosophy that I do towards corporate. But in fact, I found two people, and I'm excited to bring you the ladies from the Corporate Sellouts podcast, Taylor and Tori. I love their philosophy towards corporate. Their mission is to help you survive and thrive in the corporate world. Their podcast focuses on all things corporate, from passion to burnout to side hustling and everything in between, to make it through to be your best self while in corporate, but most importantly, living your best life. I find these two ladies really insightful, and I deeply appreciate the female perspective on the corporate world and the opportunities in front of us to get this right. Now, in this episode, we go through a few things. First, we go through what it means to be a corporate sellout. Secondly, what millennials are experiencing in post-COVID corporate life. And thirdly, the female perspective on work-life balance. And last but not least, what to do if you have entrepreneurial ambition, but you don't know where to start. Before we dive in, one last thing for you. If Uncaged Yourself is providing value, I'd greatly appreciate if you hopped on over to Apple Podcasts and left a quick, honest written review, or hit those stars in Spotify, or even just put a blurb out there on social media, screenshot, whatever it is, talking about the show. It means the world to me, because podcasting is really hard for discoverability. And I just really want to make sure we get these strategies and mindsets to the people that need them. Folks that are in corporate life that are struggling, that can make so much of it. So thank you in advance. Really appreciate it. All right, let's get to the episode. Growing up, society taught you to follow the script by choosing a career path and climbing the ladder. But for many people, this promise falls flat. Work suffocates them and life becomes painful. Here, you're trapped in what I call the corporate cage. Fortunately, there's a way out. You can take control of your corporate job and unlock a life of freedom. I call this living uncaged. Hi, this is your host, Matt Doan. I'm a coach, creator, and entrepreneur. Uncaging people is my mission because it's been my exact life journey. This show provides you the stories, principles, and tactics to make it happen. Welcome to Uncage Yourself. Welcome everyone to the Uncage Yourself show. I have the pleasure today of hosting the ladies from the Corporate Sellouts podcast. I've got Taylor, I've got Tori in the studio today. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us. Here.
You were so kind to have me on your show recently, and I was so excited to flip it around and actually get some really core questions that I have going through my head from your perspective. So let's get some goodness out to our listeners today. Now, I want to start with a term that is near and dear to you, obviously, and I want to get this clear to our listeners. Your show is titled Corporate Sellouts. What's the idea behind that term?
Yeah, I can take this, and then Tori, if you want to add on, I feel like we might have different interpretations even between the two of us. But I think I came up with this term. Tori and I have been friends for a while. We have a couple of good girlfriends that we've talked about careers and life with and everything. And in creating this podcast, we wanted it to be a really honest look at corporate life. And we wanted to share our perspectives on everything from performance raises or performance reviews to pay raises to work-life balance and everything in between. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek type of term that we are really fully embracing the corporate lifestyle. And I think I never really saw myself as someone who was going to be in a corporate job for a while, or let alone my whole career. And so I feel a little bit like a sellout, but I think it's also a good thing. And we talk about in our podcast how you can make corporate work for you too. So I don't know. That's kind of my perspective on it.
Yeah, corporate work for you. That term resonates with me. I want to kick back up on that. Tori, where are you coming from?
No, and that's why we originally found you, Matt, because we're like, I think we may call it something different, but we have the same idea going of like, for me, it is a blessing and it is freeing to kind of like work for a giant company. And it's like, I kind of look at it as like, I'm sold out to this life that I have made work for me. I love the structure. I love the biweekly paychecks that are always the same. You know, like there's so many ways that having a corporate job and the boundaries that come with a corporate job, really serves my life. And so it's like, I am a sellout to the man, you know, to the job, to the corporate world. And I'll do whatever to stay there because I love the life that it gives me. And so then the podcast is like, okay, so like we are working and living within the bounds of this large corporate structure. How do we make the most of it as millennial women? And so to me, it's like, I'm sold out to the company. I'm sold out to the life. And it's tongue in cheek, but it's like, it's also positive. And we always have a segment too, where we gripe a little bit about whatever needs to be griped about for a minute or two, but like, it's only a minute or two. And then we move on to kind of the benefits and how we're going to continue improving our experience from here.
Yeah.
I love that. And I would say you two, amongst several people I've met over the last few months, have taken the red pill too from Morpheus. Basically, you understand the environment for what it is, the pros, cons, in a great level of detail that most people have not. Most people get caught up in it. They get subsumed by it. They get emotionally connected and overrun and overwhelmed and burned out by it. But you see it for what it is. You understand it, that it's an asset to your life, but you're not letting it control you. You are controlling it while giving goodness back to it, giving value to your organization, giving value to your colleagues, but you're not letting it overrun your life because you have clarity. You're like a free agent here.
Exactly. And I think it's about emotionally disconnecting and about boundaries and understanding that it's transactional. And transactional is not a dirty word, right? Like they're getting what they need and you're getting what you need. Transactional is awesome. You know, like it. But it's not all consuming. It's you get this, I get that. We agreed on this mutually, and then I'm going to go on my way at 5:01 p.m. when I close my laptop. So
I think another big piece about the corporate sellouts term, we looked up the definition when we first started the podcast, and it, you know, according to Google, the really kind of official term, I guess, or official definition behind it is someone who gives up their passion in order to make money for a large corporation. And so you're kind of selling out your passions. But we talk about in our first episode how you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do both, and you can have your passions on the side, and you don't necessarily have to be passionate about your corporate job all the time in order to be happy.
Yeah, and that in fact, passion about your job is kind of an elitist construct that we need to look at and understand that, you know, we need to make sure that we are provided for, our families are provided for, and that we have a fulfilled life. And that's kind of what Taylor and I have realized that we're passionate about. So
I love the clarity of thought here, especially when you use the words transactional amongst others. I mean, I actually put a LinkedIn post on this today, the idea of when we can have a transactional relationship with our job. It's just looking at it for what it is. It's a business exchange between employer and employee. They're treating you transactionally, right? If they have to let you go, they will. It's not emotional attachment at that point. And you just reciprocate. You have that same relationship back. It's, you know, I'll give you this, they'll give you this, and it's an exchange. Call it for what it is. And if you get purpose or meaning or some feeling of passion coming about, that's just a cherry on top. That is a bonus, but don't rely on it because you're going to be left wanting. Everybody eventually, even if they have a high at work, is going to come down and have a void in their soul that they need to fill elsewhere. And the job, no matter how great that job is not going to fill that void.
That is so true. And I think it's freeing too to realize that. And Matt, one of the things, like when we talked to you and we did a lot of research on your website and listening to your podcast, just like the emotional detangling from work, it's so freeing to be like, oh, you're upset that I did this analysis this way? Cool. Okay, well, I'll prioritize redoing it. Have a great day. Like, it's just so nice to not take it personally because it's business. And it's one transaction after another until 5 p.m. and then you do it the next day, you know? And I think that looking at it that way has allowed us to take kind of the golden handcuffs of a corporate job and say like, no, this is going to bless our lives. Let us do what we want to do to live a fulfilling life that we can pay for.
Yeah, I think one of the things I took from our podcast together was the mission critical idea of like, you get in, you do your mission critical work, and you get out, and you don't tie any emotional attachment to anything. It's just really in and out. And I feel like that that is kind of disconnecting the passion from it a little bit, and it's more freeing than you think, for sure.
Yeah. And one thing to add to that has Taylor and I cracking up, and our friends too, our like corporate friend group, is that we joke all the time, like, okay, I'm going in like Navy SEAL mission, just like Matt said. And you know what? And I have to remind myself, I'm like, Navy SEALs did not check Instagram. Navy SEAls did not go like refill their water. Like Navy SEAls are in and out. And like, that is maybe a little extreme to compare yourself to a Navy SEAL when you're trying to crank out an analysis for your VP. But like, it is. And it's not funny either, because the military is not funny, but like, it is so helpful to understand and think about it from that lens. Like, you're getting in and you're getting out, and you're not distracted, and you're laser focused, and then you're done, you know? And working like that does not even take 40 hours a week. So for my role currently, at least. So yeah, I know that was like very long-winded of our like POV on corporate life and how we're incorporating kind of like the uncage yourself mantra and corporate sellouts essence together, but we I think we're both in like a really clear place, like you said, Matt.
We have a ton of overlap, and I love that we're both representing, you know, the millennial generation. Obviously you've got a much deeper female perspective. I represent, you know, the male side for the most part right now, and I love that we're kind of blending our missions here, because there is so much overlap, but there's a lot that we can learn from each other and then therefore share out to the world, because we're having this conversation right now. And I'd like to think about, if we could, ladies, for a second, now that we are essentially post-COVID, for lack of better terms right now, right? Like, we are past that. We were in this weird honeymoon phase of everyone's working from home. The economy was sweet. Like, we had all this extra time. It was like this newfound gift from the world. Now we're seeing things like return to office. We're seeing layoffs. We're seeing an economy that's going down. But we still, for the most part, long for a lot of the attributes that COVID created for corporate life, right? All that flexibility, that autonomy. And we're in a different state now. We're recording this in June of 2023. I'd like to just understand from your point of view, where you sit within the jobs that you're in, where are we right now? Where's the sentiment amongst the big corporate employee today when they're working for large firms? What are they thinking and feeling right now?
Oh, I feel like there's so much in there that we could unpack, but we just went over this in one of our more recent episodes because it is very top of mind. For me personally, my company just announced that they want us back in the office 3 days a week. And first of all, I guess we didn't go over this yet, but I'm 9 months pregnant currently. So I'm taking full advantage of that excuse as a way to kind of have a little bit more flexibility in my life. But going into the office 3 days a week is challenging for a lot of people, even if you're not, physically challenged. But you working from home, you had this flexibility. You were able to work around your kids' schedules if you're a parent, or caregiver schedules if you're taking care of, ailing parents or whatever it might be. You could create your own kind of lifestyle balance, and you could log in early and then go do what you needed to do and then come back. And being in the office really inhibits that a lot. So we're seeing a lot of pushback, anecdotally at my company, just because it really upends people's lives a lot. But I think the overall corporate sentiment too is this isn't something that employees would necessarily choose. I think flexibility is still going to be a huge differentiator for organizations, and those that can continue to provide flexibility and still get that maybe in-office culture that they're looking for. If they can have that balance, I think that's going to be a huge strategic differentiator. So we'll see which companies can kind of weather the storm there, but it's interesting to experience firsthand for sure.
Yeah. And I think my company is at a totally different crossroads where we are still permanently work from home if you desire, and they've promised that we always will be, basically. And so I think what you're seeing across the corporate landscape is different leadership styles coming out, and what is driving different leaders to make different decisions. And you're really seeing what leaders value. I know the CEO of my company, he values family. His children are on his lap sometimes in COVID, like in giving presentations, because they're just home, you know? So I think that, and then Taylor's company is run by someone much older, and like, you know, he has no need to like be at home with young kids and stuff. And so I think you're really seeing what motivates leaders and how they carry that out, and their understanding of what motivates and what's best for everyone else. But, you know, I think there's just a lot of, I'm trying to think of the word, like not disenfranchised. What am I feeling? Like I'm feeling kind of over it, like with a lot of disgruntled. Yeah. Like, you know, we've done layoffs, we've done cost cutting, and that's not really post-COVID. That's just the current state of the economy, which is mixed with the fact that we are in this post-COVID world. And so I think a lot of people are just feeling really disengaged, but the return to work certainly adds to that. And I think also a lot of companies are using return to work as a low-key way to cause attrition. And so, you know, they're needing to do layoffs, not wanting the optics of layoffs. Well, let's see if we make it a little bit more miserable for people, how much will quit naturally, and then we won't have to have those negative optics. So yeah, I think we're seeing like the true colors of a lot of leadership styles play out. But I'm thankful to be on a team and a company that is permanently remote, and I hope it stays that way. Yeah,
the leadership aspect is hugely a driver of this, right? And sometimes it's follow the ultimate leader, CEO and down. They set a tone, whether knowingly or unknowingly, about what's to take place. And now if you have, say, a smaller company and someone, and say they got small kids at home, and they're going to set a tone of valuing lifestyle and home life, that's going to cascade down too. But I've often found within larger organizations, you have a lot more wiggle room, because the CEO, for example, doesn't have as much say in your daily life, right? They're so far up there. So you got to ask yourself within your smaller group, maybe it's 10 or 100 people, whatever it might be, what is this company within a company that I sit within? What can I safely push against the edges with? What can I really ask for? What can I set my preferences for, rather than just give in to the majority and what they're being asked to do? Taylor, right? Like you said, you're 9 months pregnant. Like there's a situation here, there's preferences. And I really think there's so much opportunity here. And I would love your take to say, listen, I can be so much more effective here. I can be laser focused. I can get the outcomes we need as a team. Here's my business case. Here's why it makes sense. And if you ask me to follow the majority and spend 2 hours in traffic every day and all that stuff involved in getting to and from work, here's what it's costing you and the team. Right? Like I don't get my creative time in the morning because you've taken it away from me. My best brain power is now taken by showering and getting my kids out the door and being in a car. Yeah. Are you really willing to sacrifice my best 2 brain hours for that? And let's talk about just kind of the pro cons, almost like a business case. I would love to see people have the bravery to do it. And we'll get to this in a second, but I feel a generation like Gen Z is going to be the ones to start making that case.
For sure. I think, you know, it's funny, like there's this cycle of like, you know, tougher generation, softer generation. And I think like millennials were raised by and shepherded by a tougher generation because they were raised by people who were in World War II. And, you know, now we have millennials are quite softer in their leadership style. And, you know, you see a lot of TikToks like, oh, whenever I am sad at work, I go to my millennial boss and they help me. It's so nice, you know, like, and now these Gen Zers are kind of like bulldozing their way in. And I think that you're totally right. We're going to see a lot more of that. Like, excuse me, no, I'm not doing that. But Taylor and I have done a lot of research that there is no, we can't find studies that say it is less productive when people work remotely. Every study that has been done over the course of COVID has pointed to the fact that there is no loss of productivity when people are remote. There is only gain, if anything. There's only gain in work life, in happiness of employers. of employees, especially when it comes to marginalized groups. So women and people of color who are having to raise young children, be with other members of their family in multi-generational households. And so it really begs like a diversity and inclusion question of like, who is this benefiting and who is this harming the most? Which Taylor and I can't help but get on that diversity and inclusion soapbox pretty much every episode for every topic because it is also interrelated.
It all interwoven. Like
exactly.
It's hard to divorce it from any topic. But yeah, I think Gen Z is definitely going to be, and we say this about every generation. At least with millennials, we've seen like, are millennials disrupting this, or are we killing the supermarket? Are we, all of these like articles about millennials disrupting. And I think it's always a good thing. It's like every generation has asked questions of why do we do things this way if it's not beneficial? Maybe there's a better way of doing things, and maybe we don't do things the way that we've always done them just because it's the way we've always done them. So I think it's only going to be a good thing having a younger generation entering the workforce and asking those pointed questions a little bit more.
Yeah. I can't wait to see how this unfolds. It's going to take a few years, but especially as Gen Z gets more and more into the middle to senior ranks, exactly. I've often thought over the last few years how being a millennial, I think we kind of represent the end of the industrialized era, at least for knowledge workers, right? Like we got passed down this script from World War II and before on down to follow these default paths, choose this, climb ladders, live American dream. And now that's kind of disintegrating in front of us, honestly, because we see options. We see options from lifestyle, from earning money, from doing work you actually love, instead of just gritting and bearing down a path for 30 to 40 years. And then, of course, you look behind you at Gen Z, who is just like, screw this. You're not messing with my day or my mental health or my passions. I'm out of here. And I'm like, that's bold and maybe reckless, but I'm admiring that at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you're right, Matt. Like when you look at the construct of the 40-hour 9-to-5 work week, not only was that created by Ford Motor Company to be conducive to assembly line work, but it was created in a time where a vast majority of workers had a partner that they were married to who took care of the home and lived and worked in the home. And so I think that, we've gotten to a point where that we're no longer all having to be at the same place at the same time such that we can work on an assembly line together. And we also are having 2 parents working, 2 partners working, people getting married later and not having that partner to lean on, whether you have kids or not. And so now it's just really kind of looking at, well, what makes sense for the fact that we're not, working on assembly lines with one partner taking care of the home full time. And so I think that's why remote work to me is so conducive, because I can take a load of laundry out in between work, or I can go to the gym early and then make sure that like my partner gets off to work with his lunch and then like do my stuff and then, make it all balanced. And so I think we're having to figure out like what's the new way of making sure that our work and home life is fully taken care of. And I think we let it go on in a way that was conducive to assembly lines for a while and like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. And COVID was really the disruptor of like, wait, do we have to do that? We don't. And we probably shouldn't.
Yeah. So we use the word balance. We tie that to work-life balance. This term, like it makes me a little upset even saying that term because I have so many emotions towards it. But it's a common term. People get it when we say it aloud. And I want to take this opportunity from your perspectives, especially from the female perspective. We're in 2023, we're post-COVID. Taylor, you're about to have your first child. Like there's a lot of dynamics that are different than even a couple of years ago. I want to understand from where you two sit in the lives you experience each day. How should we think about work-life balance going forward? What would you want it to be even?
Yeah, I think I've definitely put a lot more thought into this recently because of my situation in life. And my husband is a teacher and he doesn't have work-life balance essentially with his job. He has to go into school, teach from a certain time to another time, and like he can't just run out to the grocery store in the middle of the day like a remote worker in tech could do. So even though I'm kind of like the breadwinner in our family and everything, I have to still have that work-life balance in a sense because he doesn't. And so it's interesting. I think it's like Tori was saying, we have to think about it from a 2023 perspective and not an assembly line 1920s perspective where we had one single breadwinner who was going out and making all the money for the day and then coming home while somebody else took care of it. So I think about it more about integration. It's a balance, yes, but you're more integrating your life and your work together because you might have to log in at maybe 6 a.m. in the morning or something to work with someone over in Singapore or whatever it might be. But then you log off at noon and you go to the grocery store for a couple of hours, whatever it might be. I think if companies can get behind the non-traditional kind of flexible work and make it make sense for people in their daily lives and how it works with, their schedules and everything, I think there's a lot of ways to get creative. And that also opens you up as an organization to hiring more diverse talent and having people with more, just diverse ideas and everything too. So it benefits the workforce if the company can get behind a little bit more of a non-traditional type of schedule and allow that flexibility.
And I'm just curious, Taylor, this integration, making that a reality, how do you think about the onus of who's responsible for that? Is it more employer or employee?
Yeah, I think it's on the employer to empower employees to feel brave enough or, empowered enough to go to their leaders and say, hey, can I switch up my work schedule today or, on Tuesdays every week because I have to go pick up my kids at 3 p.m. instead of at, 5 or whatever it might be. I think employees, yes, should feel empowered to do that in a perfect world, but it really comes from the top. Like the leader, the organization really needs to set the precedent that you're not going to get in trouble if you ask for those things, and you're not expected to be here, from a certain time to a certain time, as long as you get your work done. And that's one thing that I will say about the company I work for is they are still very flexible in the sense of we want you to come into the office because we want that, in-office culture and everything. But if that means from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. instead of from 8 to 5, that's okay. Or, if you have to leave for the afternoon, whatever, that's okay too. Work with your leader, talk to them. They'll, we'll make sure that it makes sense. So I think if companies can do that, it would empower employees to ask for those things more.
Yeah, I love that. Let's treat people like adults. And obviously, if they're not doing their job, there's consequences involved because we are running a business here. And it makes me think a lot about, we just have to get very clear from leadership to workforce, that relationship on what are the expected outcomes. And outcomes don't deal with we're talking about ends, not means. Means are like all the daily stand-ups and the admin stuff and the responding to emails in the same manner that everyone else is. Those are all means. Those are all very moldable based on what we believe is the right thing to do. It's the ends, like Taylor in your role, Tori in your role. What does success look like? Explicitly clear. And then you engineer that to reality. If we kind of cast that out to everyone, I just love to think, maybe it's a little bit robotic and machine-like of me to think this way, that how much more efficient the organization would be and how much more life we would be giving back to people.
Exactly. And that's why I think that, what I said earlier about leadership's true colors is coming out. A good leader, if you have been promoted to be a people manager, you should know about the individual contributor role that you're managing and know what to scope out to expect your individual contributors to do and understand what they should be doing. And then by the time Friday comes around or the checkpoint comes around, did they do it or did they not? Because y'all have, as a leader, what to expect. You've communicated what outcomes you've expected when, and that is what we're measured on. We're not measured on if we hit 40 hours or not, you know? And so I think that what we need is leadership who understands how the business works and who understands how to allocate that correctly. And who's not insecure and thinking like that they don't have the respect needed for their employees to do the work that they've been tasked with. And that's what I saw a lot at my old company was, you know, constant micromanaging due to insecure leadership. And that I hope they did well through COVID, because like that was not going to fly if we're all at our own, you know, houses. But yeah. And then I think also work-life balance from a female perspective, I think it has a lot to do with if you're in a partnership, you know, a lot of the home work traditionally falls to a female if you're in a heterosexual relationship with a male and a female. And I think that we can only go so far with company policies and great maternity leave and great, you know, time off and flexibility if we're not expected to do a full job and then do full home work. And I know that your podcast is predominantly men. And I would just say that, you know, there is not work-life balance as a female if there's work-life balance, but not work-life balance, you know? And I know that like so many men are excellent. Like Taylor and I as partners are amazing. We're like, oh, what did your husband cook you for dinner tonight? Like, you know, what did your husband cook you for dinner tonight? And vice versa too. But I think like that piece is an additional hurdle for many females in traditional heterosexual relationships, that work-life balance can't be achieved unless the work and the life balances are achieved. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, oh, go on, Taylor.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's why in COVID we saw so many women leaving the workforce, because they were the ones who were having to take care of kids at home who couldn't go to daycare or who having to homeschool kids. And we did see a mass exodus mm-hmm. from the workforce, predominantly for women. And I think we're still kind of trying to rebound from that too. So it's definitely a very prominent thing right now in our economy, in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing I will offer, and I've practiced this over the last few years, and it's a very privileged thing to say, I will admit this, is if people, and I'm talking about like knowledge workers in corporate, right? Say you're making a good salary, like you've got some comfort mm-hmm. in your life, some security, right? The idea of buying back parts of your time and energy is invaluable. For example, I used to spend my Saturday mornings mowing my lawn, and it's a pretty large lawn. And between doing that and all the aspects of it and showering after, I'd be 3-4 hours. Like it was a lot. I learned to outsource that for very affordable, and I was giving money back to people that could use it, right? Like it furthering the economy in other ways. Exactly. And that felt good. And then I found some very affordable ways to get parts of my house cleaned too. Again, very privileged to say, right? But yeah, between stuff I would do, the stuff my wife used to do, and we offloaded small parts of that, between the time and energy, and then therefore the mental peace and capacity we regained, I want to challenge people in a healthy way to say, start small. What is something mm-hmm. small that you don't really enjoy doing and you don't have to do, whether it's some form of cooking or cleaning or whatever? Look for little ways just to get the ball rolling. See what it feels like. See what's possible. And then learn what you can do with that time, the person you can be, whether it's self-care, whether it's better work, being a better parent. Think of all what's possible. I really want to challenge people to see where it's possible, because your brain will say, I can't afford it. Well, can you afford not to at this point if you're so stressed and burned out?
For sure. Yeah. And I think there's like, there are, like you said, like baby step iterations of that. Like I have a house cleaner once a month, You know, like it's not every week, it's not every other week. Like it's like I still have to clean in between, but like I know once a month, like my house is getting a deep clean, and that takes like the mental pressure off of like I have to get on a ladder and dust the ceiling fan right now. Like no, like that, like the big macro things are taken care of, and I just have to make sure my house is tidy throughout the month, you know. And so I think there are ways to start small and like chip away at the life part of the work-life balance. So I think that you're totally correct, and totally correct that it also like it comes from a place of privilege. And a lot of times I'm like, screw it. Like I'll just hire out all these things and then I'll have like equality in my relationship. And then it's like, well, that helps one person, but not 3 billion females, you know, but, and just to say, I don't know what it's like to be a man. I'm sure there are aspects of work-life balance that are trickier for men too. And I don't want to negate that, right? But you know, as from a female perspective, that's kind of my POV on work-life balance.
Helpful. And I think we're giving some tools and perspectives to people that we can both use. I like helping partnerships out where like one partner understands the other partner a little bit better, therefore we're better together, right? Whether it's investments, whether it's emotional understanding, operating better at work, asking for things, right? All good stuff.
Yes.
I'd like to take a little shift now if we could. This is something we've talked about in the past, which is around, again, since COVID, we saw a lot of desire for entrepreneurship. People in corporate roles, seems like everyone and their mother became like a coach or a consultant or wanted to, an aspiring person, right? In that sense. And we saw the possibilities, at least they were talked about a lot online on what it's like to do your own thing, right? Create something of your own. Let's use the term side hustle for now because everyone gets onto that, understands what we're talking about with side hustle. For someone, say, in corporate right now, and they're a little bit frustrated, they feel they're selling out, they feel a little caged, right? And they think they're meant for something more. And it feels like they have this entrepreneurial spark in them. Where would you advise they start? Because I know you both have side hustle experience, understanding how to use your entrepreneurial side too. Like, where should they start when they're feeling a little bit trapped, but they want something more of their own?
I feel like this is such a good piggyback from the last topic because you have to start by carving out time in your life. And I know, Matt, you talk about this a lot, you know, in your podcast and your coaching, but you have to look at your life and say, what are the things that I'm spending my time on? And how could I better spend my time to do things that I'm actually passionate about, or to start that coaching course that I wanted to, or whatever it might be. And I think what I would say too is Tori and I have both had multiple side hustles over the last couple of years, and we've also had very stable corporate careers. And it doesn't have to be either or. I think you can use your corporate job as a launching pad if you have that flexibility and that balance in your corporate job, and you're able to maybe spend a Friday afternoon working on a side hustle because you got your work done earlier in the day or in the week. You know, look for those opportunities and just start kind of chipping away at it. Like the worst thing you can do is just wonder, what if? And I think, with a podcast, for example, with Tori and I, like, we were just like, let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And it's been such a fulfilling and enriching side hustle, quote unquote, for us. And, you know, it's not something that takes a ton of extra time, but we've been intentional about carving out the time in our work week and in our daily life to make it happen.
Yeah. And I would say, as far as where to start vision wise, you know, if you're making a plan for yourself or kind of mapping out what you're going to do, make sure that plan includes a corporate job for 1 to 3 years. Like, fully just say, like, I'm going to do this for 10, 20, whatever hours a week in addition to my corporate job. I think, you know, I got really burnt out of a side hustle that I did for many, many years because I was always like, okay, when can I quit? When can I quit? When can I quit? I had a full on workload with the assumption that I would make 6 figures easily, which is a false assumption. with my side hustle in addition to my regular job in tech. And then I could just quit and in addition pay my own, I don't know, $800 a month for health insurance and like everything that a corporate job provides. And so I think it's like grounding yourself in the understanding that you can use your corporate job as a tool to propel your side hustle if you first, kind of go through the uncage yourself process of like whittling down to mission critical. How do I perform well at my job and cut the fluff such that I have energy and time to do something else? Because for me personally right now and forevermore and less than crazy changes, a side hustle has to go with a corporate job for me. I will not forgo that stability unless, I don't know, I become a multimillionaire, which I'm not necessarily planning on. So, yeah.
This became really real for me too recently with maternity leave, because I know that I get almost 5 months paid maternity leave with my job. I wouldn't get that if I was just doing a side hustle or, just an entrepreneur. So you have to look at the stage of life that you're into and think realistically, what am I gaining from my corporate job and how can I use that in a way that's going to help, propel my side hustle? Maybe in a couple of years, like Tori said, you can, really dive in and quit your corporate job. But I think it can be a really great way to help your entrepreneurial desires too. And you don't have to do either or.
Yeah, I love that we're both advocating that middle ground. It's most people would choose one of two paths. It's either, climb the ladder and kind of hate it, but just go all out and get all the gains there, or get angry and escape the 9 to 5. And there's there's a much more intelligent process to go through, especially if you've got family, financial responsibilities, debts. Like, we got to be very clear about this and the riskiness of entrepreneurship. I will raise my hand and say it is anything but certain. It's completely uncertain, until you figure out some of your mechanics to get this going, right? I like to think about it as well. It's a tool, or almost calling your job as a venture capitalist for your life. It is funding your life.
Yes.
It's providing you, obviously, income, skills, relationships, experiences, all that you can leverage in entrepreneurship and in lifestyle to build something more. But you've got to have vision on where you're going, right? So you take all those things as assets from that venture capitalist, aka corporate, and actually be intentional and use it towards building something else. It might be an off-ramp towards running your own business someday, full-time.
Yeah.
Option, not necessarily for everyone. Obviously, it's probably not for everyone. A small portion of the world should go after that. And it makes me think of, over the last few months, I've developed some clarity on kind of like the uncaging process. And it has 3 steps, which are in exact alignment with Taylor and Tori, what you're talking about. First is to develop corporate freedom, where you have space from the job, emotional detachment. You are surgical in and out, right? You create space in life because there's no transformation without space. Secondly, you create an intentional life design. You need to know where you're going as a lifestyle for yourself, for your family, for those you care about, because career makes no sense without the life that you're clicking it into, right? And then thirdly, after creating space and knowing where you're going, you can explore what I call hybrid entrepreneurship. This idea of, while in corporate, leveraging that asset of corporate, then we can carefully explore your entrepreneurial desires, where it could work, whether it's a cash business, whether it's a passion business. Like, there's lots of options there, but we have to go through that sequence to make it intelligent, to manage risk, and eventually get to some big upside.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to think of corporate as a work stream in your life. And I really came to this conclusion when I was my sister's maid of honor. She's an attorney in big law, works over 80 hours a week, has a couch in her office, definitely sleeps in it sometimes. So I literally planned her whole wedding. So fun. Because it was low stakes for me. It wasn't my wedding. So I had full on wedding planning, was getting my master's degree, was on the board of a nonprofit, and had a corporate job. And those are all massive work streams. And work was one of those work streams, and I planned out my day like, okay, well, I have a meeting with the wedding photographer at 1 p.m. I have work, in this time. I have this school assignment due in 3 days. And you map out your day based on all of your work streams. And a work stream could be parenting, a work stream could be your side hustle. A work stream could be your job, anything that you're doing. Like, work is just one of those things. And the great thing about remote work for me is that you can integrate all of it the way that you need to if you are being a good steward of your job and getting all of your work done. So that's how I think about it.
Beautifully said. I love that. I just want to use this little tidbit, this conversation here, to inspire people that there's huge upside, both in financial reward, spiritual reward, like time reward by going entrepreneurially. And I think we can all say, like, if you feel it within you, you should pursue it intelligently, but you should pursue it when the season in your life is correct, right? When it's good enough, go pursue it, because you will become a different person. You will build new muscle and you will be resilient in the economy. You will be more inspired and energized by doing it. It's a beautiful experience to start that path. And I encourage everyone to do it when the time is right. Cool. I love that dialogue. I'd like to wrap up with something I often ask folks, which is for each of you, Taylor, and then Tori, what does Uncaged mean to you?
I think for me, it's really this idea of integrating your life and your work together and doing it in a way that enables you to pursue your passions, your side hustles, whatever it might be, and then also live a really fulfilling life. I think for a while, for me, it looking at Uncaged, I was like, oh, that means I'm not working a corporate job anymore. But I've done a lot of reflecting. I've worked with a coach, and she has honestly helped me see my corporate job right now is the perfect thing to help me live a very fulfilling life. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are completely an entrepreneur or, on your own schedule. It can mean that your life enables you to, or your job enables you to live this fulfilling life.
Love that.
Yeah, I would say similar, like work as a tool. And I think being uncaged means that you are like broken from these handcuffs that we put on ourselves of emotionally attaching to your job and to opinions of people at your job. It's putting up strict boundaries and cutting all the fluff. I tell my friends all the time, like whenever, someone's having a stressful week, it's like, well, I have to do this and I have to do this. And I have a first date with this guy and I need to go to this nice grocery store to get all these things. I'm like, cut the fat, all the things and it's the same with work. Like, what are all the things that you're doing? And you just cut out the stuff that is not leading to high value results, and then use that smaller version of your job to serve you as a tool. You are not there to be, it's not a prison cell. And so I think the emotional detachment from it, and from finding your worth from it is really being uncaged from it.
Love it. Yeah. The cage is just a mental state. Once you step out, a whole new world is there for you. Right?
Yes.
Truly.
And I think that I didn't know that until I think it's like Matt, like talking with you and other, like, and I talk with Taylor and I talk with our friends about this. We're like, we didn't know if that was our POV in our little bubble and no one else thought that. And then I think like when Taylor found you on LinkedIn, it was like, wait, this is a thing. Yes. Okay. Like it's real. Like we don't have to be like tied to our job like a handcuff. Like we can produce good results, be high performers, and it's a thing, and then like go live your life. So I think it's like very validating to find other people with the same mindset.
100%. Taylor, Tori, I've loved this conversation. I'm just really honored to have this growing friendship with you and share our missions and go help people out there together. It's when you came my way, I was like, oh my God, this is like meant to happen. Let's have more conversations like this.
Yes.
Let's spark it in lots of different ways. In the show notes, I'll make sure to include more of your bio so people can get that, as far as some of your foundational episodes from Corporate Sellouts. Beyond that, where would you point people online so they can find more of you too and your work?
So you can find us on Instagram at Corporate Sellouts Podcast. You can also send us emails at corporateselloutspodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from people. We love to answer questions on our podcast, celebrate with you. We have a segment at the end of our podcast called Sellout Celebrations, where we just really celebrate anything that's going on in your life, in your corporate job, whatever it might be. So you can find us there. And then I'm on TikTok at Taylor in HR.
And I'm on TikTok at Corporate Girl Tori.
Yeah.
Love it.
This has been amazing.
Awesome.
We've just really
thank you so much for having us.
too.
Yeah, we'll keep doing more of this. I love the conversation. Let's keep going to help people. Appreciate the time today, ladies.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Hey, Matt here. Thanks for listening to Uncage Yourself. For show notes and more content like this, head over to uncageyourself.fm. And if you liked what you heard, I'd appreciate you leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until next time, be well, my friend.